Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Chris Locke, a veteran stand-up who you'll also recognize from literally dozens of movies and TV shows, including Filth City, Workin' Moms, Baroness von Sketch Show, Children Ruin Everything, and the revived Kids in the Hall. He plays Sebastian, the weird neighbor, on CBC's Run the Burbs, which kicks off its third season tonight in Canada at 9:30 p.m. on CBC, and he stars opposite Susan Kent in Who's Your Father, which premiered at the Atlantic International Film Festival last year and just arrived on digital and on demand. Directed by Jeremy Larder, a friend of the show, it's a genuinely sweet private eye comedy, and you should definitely check it out. So, Chris was originally going to do Sword of Doom, but only because he thought we'd already covered the movie he really wanted to talk about, David Steinberg's The Wrong Guy. And we hadn't. It's the 1997 comedy where Dave Foley plays Nelson Hibbert, a very dim business person who goes on the run after his boss is murdered, convinced the police will finger him for the crime, when the truth is he's not wanted for anything since the real killer was caught on video. A deadpan spin on The Fugitive, it features Foley bumbling across America and eventually falling for a farmer's daughter played by Jennifer Tilly, and it's found a devoted cult following among professionally funny people over the last quarter century, despite being nearly impossible to find. I should also point out that we recorded this episode just before the new season of Fargo started airing, and obviously Dave Foley is awesome in that, and everybody's talking about him now. But, we didn't know. Anyway, this is Someone Else's Movie.
The Wrong Guy is a very big deal to me. It was one of the greatest discoveries of my life in probably the year 2000, I'm trying to say. I didn't get kicked out of university. I could have gone back on what's it called? Academic probation. And at Dalhousie University, that's where I went for 1 year and just partied my butt off. And then I came home and I kind of got kicked out of my parents' house because I was being a bum. And I obviously had very bad grades. I only got my philosophy credit, which is why I'm such a genius at basic philosophy. But so I'm living in the Junction, and this is early Junction days. Do you see what I'm saying? In Toronto,
Sure.
It's just the cusp of gentrification and art galleries and couture, whatever now it is. And they had this giant Blockbuster, and so everything I could afford at that time it had to be dirt cheap, secondhand, whatever.
Right.
And in the bargain bin at Blockbuster was The Wrong Guy. And for some reason on DVD, obviously we're talking DVDs here, kids. And for some reason in like the back of my mind, all of a sudden I get a flashback to remembering a little promo about it. I might be wrong, but I swear I saw Dave Foley or someone on Letterman talking about it in like 96 or 97 when it came out. Do you have it there? I forget, but
He would have, it was 97, and I'm sure he would have, just because it was he was on news radio at the time. It was a fairly big deal for him to have a starring role in a movie so soon after Brain Candy, and the post Kids in the Hall wave.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It doesn't have like a reputation like Ace Ventura or something, or an Adam Sandler movie. But anyways, so I picked it up. I was like, oh yeah. Let's watch this. I take it home back to my place. I had my parents' old cottage TV that had the dial, like tut, 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 just to get to the next channel. And then I had an old DVD player attached to that with the old wire connected to it, with the pin in the center, the needle in the center that whatever that's called,
right?
The adapter. So I watched it on this crappy old TV, and it blew me away. Every beat of it is so funny. I know the whole movie off by heart. And then every friend I had to come over and watch it. And so, yeah, I just love, I think every single beat of that movie is classic, good, slapstick, silly comedy that harkens back to the good old days of like the Marx Brothers or W.C. Fields times 100, where it's just every point of dialogue or movement is in service of a gag. Everything. It's not even serious at all in one, and that's the world I live in. So it was like I was watching the way I want the world to be, like on a DVD all of a sudden. Just funny, silly nonsense, nonstop. And it's got a plethora of incredible Canadian comedic actors spread all throughout the cast, who I've come in contact with pretty much everyone in that movie, and I've told them I'm a fan of the movie at some point in my own personal comedy career. The only one that I still have yet to actually like greet and tell them is Combe Fior. And I was on set with Combe Fior, but he seemed like an incredibly pleasant, charming man and super professional, but we weren't situated
Sure.
enough for it would be bad if I went over to introduce myself. So I just enjoyed knowing he was on set with me. But yeah, I've told Dave Foley, I've told is it David Higgins, who's the co-writer with him, and the detective. I've told Dan Redican, I've told Mike Wilmot, I've told Boyd Banks, I've told Lindsay Lease, like I've told everyone that I've ever met affiliated with the movie, like, hey, you're in the wrong guy. It's the best movie, it's the best comedy. So that's a huge, long-winded sort of version of it, but it means a lot to me. And I still have that exact DVD from the Junction Blockbuster, but also kids or anyone else, if you need to see it, it's streaming on YouTube right now. Because yeah, my wife Kathleen Phillips and I just rewatched it a few months ago and died laughing. So it's still as fresh as ever. That's my tight summary. I couldn't say that about Sword of Doom.
I mean, you could.
I have a lot of love for Sword of Doom, but I couldn't just instantly like blast it out like this for the wrong guy. People listening, I was maybe going to go with Sword of Doom, which is also check it out.
Oh yeah, both very good. I mean, only Sword of Doom is on the Criterion Channel, which I do think they're the wrong guy will someday claw its way up there.
Yeah.
I Have to Be the Monster. I actually gave it a negative review for the Star.
Okay.
In '97 when it played when it opened theatrically. I saw it with a preview audience and it died. And as much
that's crazy
for all the love I have for Foley and everybody else involved, it's like Dan Redican.
Norm, do you think I'm a funny comedian?
I do, in a very dry way. Your thing is, I find, consistently funny. Yeah. What a weird question. Yes, of course.
So listen to me when I say that it dying in front of that audience is crazy. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, I know, 97. Okay. This actually brings up a good point that, if you don't mind.
No.
Another thing is, so Bottle Rocket, I was going to choose that as well, because Bottle Rocket and Wrong Guy are sort of my go-to, like, perfect comedy movies in my mind.
Okay.
Bottle Rocket is very dry, and that came out around the same time.
Yeah, like maybe 97, the year before.
98.
96,
yeah, 96. I think. Okay. So now, when I first watched Bottle Rocket, I watched it with a straight face pretty much the whole time, because what was everything at the time? It was an SNL offshoot character comedy. It was an Adam Sandler big man-child comedy, or it was a Farrelly Brothers wacky gross-out comedy. So when something with like dry, clever, 3 steps ahead style gags came along, the 90s brain was not ready for that. We're going back to like 70s style aesthetics with some of these types of comedy, and like I said with The Wrong Guy, even back to the 40s. So it's like the 90s brain wasn't ready for that. The 90s brain was used to Billy Madison yelling about pee pants and Ace Ventura talking with his butthole. You see what I'm saying? So
not unsatisfying things for an audience, but yeah, they're language-based, character-based, much more. Yeah. It's funny, Bottle Rocket and The Wrong Guy are almost mirror images of each other now that you mention it, because Bottle Rocket is about an obsessive fantasist, right? Mm-hmm. Like, Dignan really does believe he can set up a plan for his life and have everything fall into place, and he's just there to be used by someone else, and that's exactly what is happening in The Wrong Guy as well. Because, and
in my opinion, they are both sort of like little independent movies that but Wrong Guy could only in a cult-like status in the years following, whereas Bottle Rocket exploded Wes Anderson's career directly afterwards. But I feel like this is also a Canadian thing too, with The Wrong Guy, which is, you know, we won't need to get into that, but
No, I mean, it's absolutely relevant because, you know, among other things, The Wrong Guy was only released theatrically in Canada. It never even opened in the States. It had its success on DVD and cable more than anything else. I mean, more exclusively for 20 years. That was the only way you could see it. And
Right.
at least in Canada, it played a few screens. It did open. It did get reviewed. I stabbed it in the heart. And it was one of those things.
Thanks,
too,
Norm.
I've never. It's funny. I've never.
Have you gone back and rewatched it?
I have, yeah. And I don't love it, but I do like it a lot. And I can absolutely see why comedians will connect to it, because it is that virtuoso thing where there has been no compromising, right? Like the idea that you can have that scene where Nelson Hibbert is so stupid, so utterly dense and impervious to logic that he can, and it's Dave Foley's genius to be able to do it, that with a straight face he can look a doctor in the eye and tell them his name is Enema Bag Jones, which is legitimately funny. I mean, that I laughed at that the first time around too. But it died with an audience. It just felt like it was either going over their heads or going right behind the building somehow. Like it just completely.
You know how some people say if I had a time machine, I'd go back and kill Hitler?
This would be
I
your
would go
thing.
back and slap that audience.
Just wait at the door, every one of them as they come out.
Well, yeah, but I quickly, maybe, hopefully I justified it in the sense that it's the mid 90s and something billed as a comedy was extremely different at that time. But I don't get it, because like even like he's trying to get a ton of coat hangers out of a closet while an old man is sleeping in the hospital, and it's that classic long running, like the gag goes for such a long time because they're all tangled, they're making a ton of noise, and he keeps checking to see if the old man's waking up, and he's not. Like, I don't know how to watch that with a straight face. Like, that's insane. So it must have been a different time.
That joke is from like Fibber, McGee and Molly, right? That's the closet from 1930s radio. Just this endless noise that disrupts whatever else. Plus, it's the, you know, like Dave Foley's incredible physical. Like the guy is a born mime. He's an incredible physical actor, and his childish, guileless face is so perfect for this, because it is someone who's the character who's just being hit over and over again in the face with bats by reality. Just he is. I kind of want to see it reassessed now in the age of the
new dark ages. Well, it is like another maybe context for the 90s is we were really living in sort of like a self-contained bubble of these are absolutely the best of all times.
Yeah.
Whereas now we think we're living in this end of world dread constantly, and silly comedy is such a salve. Like, comedy is just like so desired. It's like one of the biggest industries right now.
Yeah, people need it now more than ever. And then it was, this was the Clinton years. It's also 3 years after The Fugitive, which I think is like the big impetus for the film to be shot 3 years later and then released in the year after that. But it is such a uniquely Canadian take on The Fugitive, where he imagines there's that one speech where he's just going to go on the run forever and assume a bunch of different guises, and he'll always be looking to help people, and wherever, like he's mixing up The Fugitive and The Grapes of Wrath because he's seen both movies and he just isn't bright enough to understand that it's unworkable in the present day. But the running gag of Nelson Hibbert thinking that he is the most important person in the world, like convinced that this is his story, when he is at best a bit player in this narrative. They know it's not him. You know, he's a fugitive that no one is chasing. It gives him this romantic idea of himself. He gets to live his best life, but he's delusional. He's completely misguided and not smart enough to do any of, like, I just rewatched The Fugitive as it happens because the 4K came out and it's the 30th anniversary and all of that. And you just think this is a perfect clockwork drama. And the whole thing is based on 2 opposite characters of Tommy Lee Jones and Harrison Ford's characters being brilliant men who are great at their jobs and have to learn to do something else. And Nelson, as a character, really does think he can coast through it because he thinks he's smart, but also we know no one's chasing him, so of course he's coasting. Like, the only way this works is if nobody's looking for him. And it just feels like now he'd have a tiki torch and he'd be an incel or he'd be on the alt-right. Like, he's just one of those people who needs to be the most important, bestest, perfectest, smartest boy. And he is so demonstrably not, that the comedy engine is like, it's perfect, especially with Dave Foley, who is the whitest human being on the face of the earth. You know, like, a newsreader could get away from claiming he was a Canadian by way of Minnesota. And you buy it because he has this combination of like an outward decency in his appearance where he's never disheveled. And if he is, he's having a nervous breakdown. And he's kind of upstanding. Like, he wants to be upstanding, even though all he does in this film is manipulate and abuse other people's trust because he's the fugitive.
Yeah.
It is really enduringly funny for this reason, because you are just watching a guy make every situation worse for no reward whatsoever. He does not win.
Yeah, he just happens to be in the same vicinity as the real wanted man every time. It's really, that's where it's more like Marx Brothers level nonsense to me, because, you know, they just say yes to how silly that world is and justify it every scene. You know, they stick with it. I love it.
How often do you revisit it now?
Well, I'll tell you a funny anecdote. I watched it the most when I first discovered it. For a few years, I probably watched it all the time. And if someone came over, I'd make them watch it. And yeah, but you know, it's pretty often, at least every few years now in my deep adult years. And like I said, Kathleen and I revisited it, and then still everything hit. We were having a great time. But I'll tell you one thing. This is a true story about what a nerd I am. I told you I went to Dalhousie for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
I had this crush on this girl, and one night, and we got along great. One night we stayed up all night. Classic, like, you know, 19, 20-year-old type all night thing. 5, 6 a.m. or something. You know, nothing happened. She's going back to her room. And I try to plan to kiss on her. And she's like, "What are you doing, man?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay. We're just hanging out till 5, 6 a.m. But it's not like that." Okay, sure. So then she went back to her room. Didn't bother again. I got the message. Cool. Then a year later, she's visiting Toronto. And now I'm this like, you know, crazy bum who's going to like open mic nights and taking Second City courses and stuff. And they invite me out to a party, and I party with them at a bar, and it's fun. And we're talking again and catching up. And she's basically like to her friends, "It's okay, I'm going to stay at Chris's house tonight. He's got space for me." So I'm like, wow, the thing from university. And then that I thought wasn't a thing. So then she does. We have a great night. She comes over. First thing she does when we get to my place is I make her show like Watch the Wrong Guy, and I fall asleep. And nothing ever happened between us, and I'm totally okay with that. And I chose this person had to see the wrong guy instead of trying to yawn and put my arm around her or whatever.
Yeah, but you gave her the gift of cinema.
Exactly. And you know what? That might be more important to me sometimes. Yeah.
There is something, I mean, people come up with talismans, you know, movies that they pass to friends. I mean, it sounds like this was one for you, but the sense that it was, you know, like roundly rejected by the world, by general audiences and myself included, and I still feel weird about that. But the idea that it has become a touchstone, like for comics, for comedians, for writers, directors, We just missed the 25th anniversary of the thing. It's holding up. Like now, and David Steinberg was a revered.
Oh yeah, I met him too
Oh yeah.
on Strombo's old show. He
Okay.
was a guest, and I was a guest writer for a week. Yeah.
Did you talk about it? I mean, does he have a?
No, that one was also one of those like we're moving quick. Like he's going to studio, and I'm just like a ding dong hanging around with the other guys.
Right.
Yeah, it didn't feel as opportune, but just a quick shake hand and hi, nice to meet you stuff. Yeah.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I wrote about Shout Studios' remastered Blu-ray of Walter Hill's Last Man Standing, and a few things I'm looking forward to in the year to come. I mean, I could be looking forward to you subscribing. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io, or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies, I like writing about them. Come check it out. It's been like a perk of my job that every now and then I get to run into somebody who did something that I love and can just, as an interviewer even, I would just be able to sort of start with, all I want to do is talk about Streets of Fire, and it's disarming, it's fun, it's a loose way to get into a conversation. But I think professionally too, there's something really meaningful when it comes from somebody else in the industry. Not me as a third party, as the interviewer, the journalist, but as another performer relating to it. I think it means a lot more generally when it's within the community that somebody comes back. And I did talk to Foley. Oh, I think it was when Monsters University came out. He was a voice in that, and that was the excuse. That's the thing that got me in the room with him for the first. I mean, I'd actually been to kids' tapings way back in the day, but I'd never. Yeah. He was the one. I'd never actually gotten to meet or talk to because he went to Los Angeles right away, and we were talking about his career overall, and the Run guy came up and he was just like, yeah, that was fun. That's all he said. That he doesn't see it as, I mean, this would have been 15 years later, but he just didn't see it as a bomb or a fiasco or a disappointment, any of the things that it got tarred with. Even, I mean, Nathan Rabin, the AV Club writer, ran this series, like My Year of Flops, and I've got it here. He said, it should have marked a beginning for a glorious career as a leading man and screenwriter for Foley. Instead, it marked a dead end in a life and career that would soon be full of them, which is kind of harsh. It's true. I mean, things went pretty south for him after news radio for a while, but he's come back and he's justifiably reclaimed his place as a.
That new season of Kids in the Hall, like they were all so sharp and as ever before, especially Dave Foley, so it's unfortunate. One time I was in LA, and the comedian Ron Lynch has this midnight show on Saturdays called The Tomorrow Show.
Mm-hmm.
And Ron he's a sweet, lovely guy, and he's got like a cadre of like comedy misfit friends from decades and decades of being this like inside guy with with a kind of a cult fan base. Anyways, we're waiting. I'm waiting to go on stage, and David Higgins is backstage, kind of looking quiet and a bit dour. And then I told him that I was so excited to meet him right now because The Wrong Guy is one of my favorite all-time comedies, and his face he like grew like a flower blossoming to the sun.
Aww.
So, the fact that you said Dave Foley was like, yeah, that was fun. Hopefully I sparked like some sort of remembrance of that within him, because I mean, he's the second hilarious person in that movie. Like every beat that he's in, he just nails it too. Like it's crazy that his career, like they co-wrote it together, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with Jake Hogan from The Simpsons of all people.
Yeah. So what are you talking about? This is crazy. It's crazy to me. And let me ask you, you mentioned an obscure film like Streets of Fire. Let me ask you, if you don't mind,
sure.
Risk of being a little shit here. What was your mind frame in 1997 as a younger film reviewer? and before Criterion Collection was open to every dirty, grubby little idiot's plebeian's fingers.
Yeah, I mean, I was.
Were you a Christoph Kieslowski guy?
I did love those movies. Well, 97, I would have been 29. And
Yeah.
no, I mean, I was again, like I was a kids fan from like I was at their first, if not the first taping, then the first taping of the series as opposed to the
Right.
pilot. I was there.
Okay. Right. Right.
I am still mildly offended that, nobody reached out to me when they were doing the documentary, because Jennifer Whalen is telling the story from Baroness. It's like, oh, it was fantastic. And I'm scanning the frame to see where the hell I am because I'm just in the top rafter somewhere.
Yeah.
No, I was a huge comedy fan. I knew everybody, not personally, but I knew the work of everybody involved. I had high hopes for it, actually, because this would have been a
Yeah.
year after Brain Candy, and that was. I don't think it's the bomb that everyone made it out to be, but I also agree
Yeah.
that it's not what it wants to be. Right? Like it's just
Yeah.
too fractious a project, and you see ideas floating around in it. But yeah, no, a year later I saw The Wrong Guy and it just did not land.
I guess like
I want to say it was like August too. It was a weird time to release a comedy.
right. I bet you it's a combination of um the mood of the time, but also it's got to be like comedians really respond to it. And
Mhm.
comedians' brains go 3, 4, 5 steps further with gags more than audiences sometimes, because there's, they can see the mechanism or the
Exactly.
discovery of the comedian writing. And sometimes the audience doesn't really want to care about that. They want to like get taken away more by, too silly is too silly for weirdly enough, pun
Normies.
intended,
I know.
normies.
I know.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, I know what you
You've heard
mean.
it
And
before, I'm sure. I'm a hack, but you know
no,
what
no.
you get what I'm saying?
I do. I mean, there are stories about the film I always come back to when this sort of thing happens is a movie called Bedtime Story, which was the inspiration. I mean, it's the same script for most of it for Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. But it was shot with Marlon Brando and David Niven in the roles that would be played by Steve
Oh
Martin and Michael
yeah.
Caine. It's from 1963. It's really, really expensive and it's
Yeah.
lifeless. But there are all these stories, and it's incredible. Like the Ruprecht the Monkey Boy sequences are in this film, and they're not funny. It's just Brando being a clown in a way that doesn't translate. Whereas Steve Martin and Frank Oz
Wow.
are cutting to timing and everything. And like the machinery of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels is so perfect. It's polished.
Right.
But there are stories about how Niven and Brando couldn't get through scenes. Like they had to do dozens of takes of some of the bits because they kept laughing. They kept breaking up. And there's one or two shots where you can actually see Niven sort of turning away from the camera so he can laugh or something. And it's not funny in the slightest to be on the outside.
So even going back, it doesn't hit.
Yeah. And I've rewatched it since.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh no, they found that like Frank Oz and Kane and Steve Martin solved it. Like they found a way to make this work.
Right.
And it's the genius of the film is to remake bad movies, right? Like you remake failures so you don't have to compete with the audience's expectations. But the idea
Yeah.
of we had so much fun, these jokes are so funny, and what you see is the actors are playing for each other and it doesn't translate, it doesn't reach the camera, or certainly doesn't come out the other side of the screen. The Wrong Man is not doing the Wrong Guy is not doing that. It's everybody is having a great time. I mean, Colm Feore, you cannot give this guy enough credit. All he does is pull the face that Colm Feore pulls, but he never gets credit for his comic timing, and he is really funny.
Right. I mentioned David Higgins, but Colm Feore, every beat, like to me, every every beat hits so hard. So, but I don't know. Like, yes, I just watched it again in my 40s. I discovered it at like 21 or 22.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I don't know how to but like I've definitely talked to Ennis about it. You mentioned him bringing it up before. I know Rodrigo Fernandez Stoll is a big fan of it. So it's I know other friends that have a close connection to it. So it does, but I'm in a comedian world.
Right. But that's what I mean.
So now I'm trying to, now I'm trying to figure it out. It's funny. I read songs my mother taught me, and I don't even think he mentions Bedtime Story in that whole book.
Yeah, I wouldn't be
I don't
surprised.
remember because he mentioned some of the other massive flops. Obviously,
Yeah, I
I
wonder if
can't
it's
even
just
remember that.
because it's such an indefinable work. You can't. I mean, you can't. Obviously, you can't explain how much fun you were having if you can. If everyone else can queue up the movie and go, but I'm not. I'm not enjoying myself in the slightest. And this thing is death.
Yeah.
And it was remade again. There's a third one that Chris Addison from The Thick of It directed.
Oh
It was
wow.
the one with Anne Hathaway. It was a gender swap remake. It was called when you Google bedtime story gender swap, you get porn. Um,
Uh,
let's try Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
yeah. Bedtime Story has 6.7, but I believe you that it's not good.
It's bad. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Rebel Wilson, and Anne Hathaway.
Oh, that'd be fun.
It's called The
I love the
Hustle.
thick of it.
Yeah, it's not very good, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because weirdly enough, I think everybody like what I got out of that was my appreciation for Anne Hathaway as an underrated comic actress. And if you're thinking of that when Rebel Wilson is the lead, you're kind of screwed. But yeah, it's worth. I mean, it's worth a look if you're curious. But it's. I mean,
Definitely.
I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way to pivot this to a gender reversal on the wrong guy, and I don't know that there is. I think it has to be. Like you would have to imagine a woman on the run would be smarter.
Yeah, like Kristen Wiig or something, or
That's true. She could probably do it. Mary
yeah,
Holland would crush it. But it is like that. I can
yeah.
totally understand why comedians appreciate this film because you are seeing somebody go like to 11 on the comic concept, on the idea.
I
Like,
think that's what it is. Now talking to you and thinking of the audience of the 90s, yeah, I can see that.
yeah. But it is a perfect execution of the joke. And it just keeps it is yes anding, right? Like it just keeps finding new variations on the same idea, which is that this clueless idiot thinks he's in The Fugitive.
Well, also every single, like I said at the beginning, every single beat is a gag upon a gag upon a gag. So
Mm-hmm.
that could be alienated to a person that didn't think it was going to be, it's like very in your face. The silliness.
Yeah.
It could be alienating to a person who doesn't think like, three steps ahead like that every day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even you mentioned Higgins just having this beautifully drawn out role, and we haven't even discussed like the key gag is that he isn't actually trying to be Inspector Gerard either. He's using this as an excuse to pat out his expense report and really enjoy the chase by not chasing anyone and
Yeah,
just going to a
see
bunch of
Moby Dick
nice.
the musical and eat a delicious steak.
Yeah, they're so specific too. Like those are character beats that somebody worked out in the writing of this thing. And I think an oral history of the film would be almost as entertaining, if not more so, just because you get the specific personalities involved. I mean,
Right, I could see that.
think about the way that the frame bends every time some new funny person shows up, like Rico Colantoni or Kevin McDonald or even Steinberg himself in his cameo. It's like, of course he's going to pop up. He's directing the movie, but at the same time, he's royalty, right? Like you want to see this parade of talented people and even Jennifer Tilly, who was not known for comedy.
Well, she was permanently endeared to me from The Wrong Guy.
Sure.
Her character's so funny. Oh, I also met Joe Flaherty. Also met Kevin McDonald. I guess like the only person might be a Jennifer Tilly, and I haven't met her, and I haven't met David Higgins' partner, who's constantly questioning his
Right.
tactics. Who's really funny too.
Yeah. I've met Jennifer Tilly. She's lovely. It was decades ago. It was
Wow.
before The Wrong Guy, actually. It was a movie called Shadow the Wolf that nobody remembers that she made with Lou Diamond Phillips in 1992.
Oh man, that sounds like a VHS rental from my childhood.
Absolutely would have been. Canadian film, right? So it was like a national service to put it in every blockbuster in the country.
Yeah.
Not great, but not her fault. But back to The Wrong Guy, and more specifically back to your own stuff. The last question of the podcast is always the same, which is, what, if anything, of The Wrong Guy have you borrowed or stolen or homaged? Have you ever found a way to work it into something? And I'm thinking, Who's Your Father? I mean, you mentioned it early on. There are some
Yeah.
resonances, but is there any specific thing that it owes to the wrong guy?
I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure. I mean, I think you're familiar with me from like Twitter and maybe some acting stuff that you've seen, but also I've been doing stand up forever, you know, and there's a few things that are in my blood that I can't help, and that is like Richard Pryor stand up, Mr. Show with Bob and David,
Mm-hmm.
and Bottle Rocket, and probably The Wrong Guy for sure is in my blood. Like I've probably if there's a funny intonation, maybe even like not I don't say I would lift a gag fully, but I would definitely learn a a pacing or an intonation style from The Wrong Guy. God, definitely it's in there. Probably even like some beats of Who's Your Father, like just have my love for that movie like because Larry, my character, is is pretty simple as well. And so, like, David Foley gets asked if it's like if he wants to stay with Joe Flaherty and Meg Tilly, then he'll have to do some work. And he's just like, work, like what? Like, like Larry for sure has kind of got that same sort of like, yeah, what? Like what about dessert? It's like just kind of like the wrong thing is being focused on at the moment because he's just so impulsive and selfish, or like, can't see past himself. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a distractibility that I noticed. Like Nelson is
Yeah.
constantly thinking this is the next adventure, and Larry is resisting the call to adventure any way he can. He just kind of wants to
Yeah.
stay still.
Yeah. He wants to stay still and like, it almost like, I don't even know if Jeremy meant this, but probably because I think Jeremy's script is brilliant. But like, I, yeah, it's almost like the idea of being a PI is almost more exciting than doing the work. Like, obviously, writing off all the bills on Luke Thorne, that's the rich guy's character played by Matt Wells,
Yeah.
um, is more fun. And I think his real goal is to just keep getting a glimpse of Rhonda and approval from Rhonda. So yeah, it's like that. Like an idiot says he's doing one thing, but he's distracted, and yeah, for sure, The Wrong Guy is in my blood fully. Yeah, pacing, delivery. I'm sure there's lots of stuff in there.
No, someday we'll get to break it down like a talk back with you and Foley and Higgins, and we can connect the dots on one of those big string boards.
If anyone listening has connections to David Higgins and Foley to see Who's Your Father, I mean, geez, I don't know. I would but die happy. That would be insane. I want all my heroes to see this movie because I'm genuinely extremely proud of it. it's for a Canadian project. It really stands out to me. It doesn't seem Canadian. I obviously it's very PEI, but there's lots of American and international movies that take place in small areas of their countries. I think the story is bigger than PEI. I think the romance and the comedy is bigger than just PEI. I think Jeremy and Jenna did a big thing, not just for PEI, but for all of Canada with this film. It's really cute and sweet and hilarious. And every Q&A I went to, the audience is laughing from front to back. And as soon as it's over, they ask us, where's Rhonda and Larry? Where can we see them next? So it's like they really created something here that I'm really proud of. Because when you make something in Canada, after it's wrapped, your base level is please don't be embarrassing. That's your base level that you live on. Even though you and all these great talent work together, you never know, right? And they really nailed Who's Your Father with the post production, with the music, with the pacing of the comedic pacing of the editing, letting the characters breathe, the sweetness. So yeah, I would love my heroes to see this. I could stand by it. It super exceeded my expectations, just not because I didn't trust anybody, but just because of how it usually goes in Canada. You see what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. And the sweetness is the thing
So
that absolutely like stuck out to me. It's just
That's nice.
it's a farce, and it's a detective farce especially, but it's also two weirdos finding each other, which is again the best kind of romantic comedy for me anyway.
Nice. I'm glad to hear you say that. Sue and I worked our butts off to make that the gags, but also the romance come from a real place, so it didn't seem hokey or corny or whatever. So it didn't seem like a Fairley Brothers movie. No offense.
Yeah, well, and it's something the wrong guy doesn't have, right? Like the romance is sort of incidental, and here it's the core.
Yeah.
So there you go, you win.
Yeah, there is that part where Dave Foley, where Nelson is talking to her at the door, and the light is shining through her nightie, and so the woman of her is, and he's like, "Can you turn just a little bit?" And it's like gratuitous for a sec, and classic dumb male horniness for a sec, but then she goes, "Nelson," in her amazing raspy voice, she goes, "Nelson, I just want to say how happy we are and glad we are that you're here with us, and how much it's whatever, how nice it is to have someone here with us helping out." And then he feels shame for being dirty and goes, "Oh, right. Well," and then he turns the light on so it stops illuminating through her nightie. And I always thought that part was super sweet, even though it's a dumbass movie. I think that beat definitely nails it. It goes from like, I don't know. So that's the one beat and wrong guy I would stick up for in that sense. But yeah, it's not as good as me and Sue together. No way. Susan Kent, are you kidding me? No way.
My thanks to Chris Locke, who you can see being charmingly odd as Sebastian in the third season premiere of Run the Burbs tonight at 9:30 p.m. on CBC TV and online at CBC Gem. You should also check out Who's Your Father on digital and on demand because it's a charmer. Thanks also to Ali Lemaire Shedden. She knows what she did. You can follow Chris on Instagram at Chris Locke Fun, all one word, ChrisLockefun. And if you're looking for the wrong guy, it's gone out of print again. But that Kino Lorber Blu-ray is still out there somewhere. I can feel it. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster when you can. I'll see you next week.